I'm going to be cutting out for the chip clip. It was labeled letter A, but they're all the same. But what we're going to do is we're going to start out with a piece of stock, just a 1x4, and it's actually it's nominal dimension, so it's actually 3/4 by 3.5. I'm going to cut it to 12 inches, the way I already described to you, and then we'll go step by step in the movie, or in the video, what we're doing. So essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm looking at the stock, and knots, when you're trying to flex a piece of wood, sometimes it doesn't work out real good. So we're going to try to, we don't want to use this big knot because that'll for sure break, and it takes up a large piece of the wood, and maybe we can use it for something else. You know, when we use a piece of wood for something else, it's called a drop. And the 6th and 7th graders from last year will remember that this year that we had a conversation, but the 6th graders this year won't remember me talking about drops. Drop is something that's left over that you can use later, and we'll probably use it for something else until it gets too small. But for now, I'm just going to cut this off at 12 inches, and then we'll move on to the next step. So I'm going to true it up. You can see it's got an angle on it. So I'm going to true up this end. I'm going to mark it off 12 inches, and I'm going to cut it off to the right length. This is called a miter box. The one I got at school is much smaller and less powerful, and that's by design. I wanted to have a less powerful machine up there to do that job, and it's a lot less scary to use. So I'm going to cut that angle off now. The other nice thing about using a miter box is it makes a nice clean end cut, where sometimes you use like a table saw or something. It doesn't always give you as nice an end cut. Now I'm marking it off at 12 inches. Now, if I mark this at 12 inches, I made a mark right here, just a little lead line. Now if I cut on this side, it's not going to be 12 inches anymore. So I want to make sure and cut on the right side of the line, or else my stock won't be the right length. And you have to pay attention to that, because that's one of those things that's real easy to make that mistake. So when you make a mark, sometimes it's good to put an X on the side of the line that you want to cut. That way you'll make sure and cut the right side, and your length will be the right length. So anyway, that's just a little hint. Now you may have noticed what I did was I took a test cut, I shifted the stock slightly, and if you notice, I don't know how close you can zoom in on, but right here is, see that little bit of blue, black right there? That's actually half the line. So this should be very close to 12 inches. And it looks like it's pretty much dead on. So that's what you're always striving for, is you want as perfect a cut as you can get for length or any cut. And most of the machines in the shop will be calibrated. So that's crosscut. Now we're going to move over to the table saw. Yeah, this saw blade, and this is I think a 60 tooth blade. I can't remember for sure, but I think it's around a 45 or a 60 or something like that. And this saw blade has over 100 teeth. Use this for ripping with the grain. So, you know, like this board, the grain is running this way. Okay, so a rip blade is meant to cut with the grain. But this finer blade here is made for actually plywood particle board, but it would also work for cutting cross grain. So more teeth, you want to have more teeth on your blade if you're going to go across the grain than you do with the grain. And the reason for that is binding. A piece of wood like this, well, the kerf is much larger, and for the rip, and it will bind on the saw blade if you don't use the right blade. Now what I'm going to be doing is, those were set for 5/8 inch thick. It's already 3/4 this way, and so we want to make 5/8 inch cuts. Now there is a little bit of cupping in the board. You can see that it's not perfectly straight. Across here it's like this. So you want to put the cupping so it would hold water, theoretically. And so that side goes up. So I'm going to set this fence over to 5/8. And my saws are all calibrated. When things are calibrated, that means that you've taken and adjusted the saw blades, or the distance between the saw blade and the fence to be whatever it reads on the scale. And I know if I set it to 5/8 on the saw, I'm very, very close to 5/8. And we'll be measuring a whole bunch this year. It's one of my goals to have you kids measuring very proficiently. We're going to do it in decimal form and in fraction form, so that you can become accustomed to percentages, because percentages are huge when you're working in the woods. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and make some cuts. For that thin little cut, we need 2 push sticks. I like long thin sticks. It keeps my hand a long way from the blade. And then we'll run through all this on the safety on the saw that we're actually going to be using. But use this one. Once you start feeding the stock in, you use this one to push it through, and this one to hold the stock against the fence. You'll watch how I do it, and then I'll push the stock all the way through, and this one I'll clear debris with. Never, ever, ever use your hands to clear debris unless the saw is totally stopped. Okay? Got that? I'll say it again. Never, ever, ever, ever remove debris from a saw with your hands unless it's stopped. Always use a stick. Stick is the best. Alright? That's what we're going to do. Just always use a stick. So before you make your cuts, if you don't have push sticks, don't make the cut. Anyway, put the hearing protection on. Let's get the cut made. Okay, the cut is made, and one of the reasons I made them 5/8, if you add up 5/8 all the way across, you end up with a leaf of about 3/8. Well, you see this knot here? That it gives an opportunity to cut out a knot. It's one of those things where I know there's knots, it's a defect that will cause the quality of the product to get less. So I actually, that's something I forgot to mention earlier, is that you want to leave yourself a little fudge room for imperfections in wood whenever you can. And this is a situation where I was able to cut out that knot, which is a defect, which will make a less good product. So anyway, we'll be moving over to the bandsaw now to make some a stop cut. Okay, we're over at the bandsaw now, and there's a safety thing here we need to talk about with the bandsaws. This blade guard has to be kept in such a place where you can't cut off your fingers. It's real easy right here. This whole blade is exposed and capable of cutting you. So what I told you in the past is you got to keep this bandsaw blade down, or figure out a way to keep it down close. And so I'm just going to set that in there. This is about where it should be set. So instead of having that large exposed area of blade, you want to bring this down until it's just above the stock. But now, I can't get this close enough to make my cut. See how it's hitting here? I don't know, can you see that? Right here in between? You can? What we need to do is come up with a situation in which that we can make that work. And I thought this would work quickly and easily, but this is not going to work the way I was hoping. Oh, I guess it'll work that way, but how do I get that to clamp on? Well, one way or the other, you got to figure something out to make this work, and this is not going to, so I'll have to go grab another piece of stock. What I did was this piece of wood is nice and parallel the whole length, and I added these two cleats on, and then I'll put a C-clamp to hold it in place. And then I'll be able to slide it right up next to the blade as close as I need to, just be able to remain nice and safe from cutting my fingers off, or cutting my fingers at all in the blade. And you want to have it as close as you can without interfering with your work. And you keep modifying things until everything is the way it needs to be. Clamps are really nice, just like having an extra set of hands. Alright, now we can slide this in or out to whatever we need it to be. So now the scale here is no longer going to work. So you can set this at 3/8 and all you'll do is come up against this. And what do we need? We're cutting, this is 5/8. So half of 5/8 is, do a little multiplication like I've showed you, it's 5/16. Okay? So it's 5/16 and you want to be about halfway in between. So we're going to make a little experimental cut. We'll do a mark at 5/16. We'll know that's about where the bandsaw blade should be cutting. Adjust it more than once. Now I've got to push this all the way up until 7/8 of an inch away before I need a push stick. Now I'm going to use this finger to push it against the fence, and I'll use this to push it up close to the blade. That's about as close you want to get, but I did forget to do one thing, and I forgot to mark 7/8 on here, so I knew where to stop. So on the center of the stick, I'm going to mark 7/8 of an inch, getting ahead of myself. I always love to cut. Laying out is kind of one of those things that it's a necessary evil to do your work, you know. Alright, so this was the side that was against the fence, so now I'm just going to run it right back down that slot, and it'll be just fine. Keep doing each one just the same exact way, and we're going to have a set of 4. Okay, we're going to move on to the drill press and drill our 3/16 hole in the appropriate place. Probably show you how to lay it out with my square, and then we'll drill the hole. And we'll do a little sanding and a mock-up of one to draw it, to put a bolt in, and we can spread it apart and the thing, make sure it will work and not break, and we'll be in good shape. I think we'll be ready to finish them at that point, but finishing will be up to you guys. All right, now I'm going to just lay out the holes over here on the bench. A couple ways to approach that, I guess. I like to use these squares. You can set up 1 or 2 squares to do it. A couple ways to do it, like I said. So anyway, to get 7/8, half of 7/8 is 7/16. So you mark this at 7/16. If I had another square, then I would simply, so the slot, and so our bolt has to go through here. So you want to have the bolt go perpendicular to the slot. That's important. If you drill it this way, it's going to weaken it and it'll break really quickly. So you want to make sure that you're going crossways into it, so that it's actually holding this together. That's what the bolt is there for to do, so hold that together so it don't break. So you want to be on this surface here. Best way to find center is you make a mark on this side, like this, and then you flip the square over and see if it's the same mark. See if it lands on the same mark. If it does, then you know you're dead on center. And it did a pretty good job. I made a mark both sides, and it just made it right out of that line. That's plenty close. Probably within 5 or 10 thousandths of an inch, which is plenty good. So anyway, now we're just going to do that to all of them. So get them all laid down. So I'll mark them all out at 7/16. 7/16. 7/16. 7/16. You know, on these, probably vary a little bit. If we're off a 16th here and there, it probably won't hurt a ton. Just again, it's all about functionality. We want to make sure that all this stuff works well. Otherwise, you won't use it. If you're going to give them to your parents or your grandparents or something, you want stuff that's going to work well for the people you give them to, or even if you use them yourself, you want to make sure everything is good quality. You should always have your sleeves rolled up, right guys? Just thought of that. Silly me. Alright. You touch off on the crosshairs with a bit, and just make sure that's what I'm doing, is I'm just touching it. And when I know I'm where I want to be, I go ahead and drill it. That one looks much better. See, it looks like it's much better on the center. Touch off, make sure it's good. Drill the hole. And again. Plenty usable. Alright, so now we're just going to sand off the corners and tidy them up, and then we'll be ready to put a bolt in, and I'll show you how it works. Usually I like a real rounded corner, so see I'm holding it. That's a good way to sand a long skinny thing. Now when I'm ready to flip it over on the corner, I just flip it over. I sand the whole length 4 times, or something close to that. We do have electric sanders in the shop, but this is so small we can sand off the majority of the kerf marks pretty quickly just by doing it by hand with a sharp piece of sandpaper. 1, 2, 3, 4. Something like that. A few extra times to get, or a few less times, doesn't matter that much. Just want to make sure it's nice and smooth to the touch. Yeah, it's nice. Alright. Then the ends, I take all the burrs off. On the corners a little bit, a little nicer. One of the corners always make a piece of wood feel smooth and velvety. That's the kind of look, or that's the kind of feel you want out of a piece of wood. Just do that to get rid of some of the burrs inside the slot, so you can put the sandpaper right inside there. There. Huh. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I'll just show you with this one. I'll go grab a bolt and we'll put a nut and a couple washers on there and be pretty cool. Okay, we're just going to do a couple washers. This is one of those nylocks I was telling you about. I don't know. Can you see that, Don? See how it's got the little piece of nylon on the top, around the end of the bolt, and you can see it. Okay, what that does is it actually, the nylon is just like a little bigger than the screw or a little smaller than the screw, so when you turn it on, it actually binds on the screw thread and keeps it from coming off. So this nut shouldn't come off easily, it should resist. It's the same thing when you put it on, it's going to resist you putting it on, which is fine. That's what you want. So anyway, put a washer on the bolt, put the bolt through the hole, and then you put this on the other side, and this is all done after you finish, okay? This is the last thing you do is put this on. You put the nylock on there, and then you use a little wrench and a driver. I'm doing this way. You could use a screwdriver and a little wrench too. There's just very few threads that you really have to run it on, so it'll take a couple minutes either way. Anyway, you put the wrench on there, and then we're just going to tighten it up until it's snug. It don't have to be extremely tight. You can actually break the wood if you get it too tight, so you want to be a little gentle. Now, the reason we put that on there is so when we spread this out, normally it would want to crack right there, and so this will give that a lot longer longevity. Something like this could actually last for years and years, and then you just need a rubber band. You put the rubber band around the end, and you got your nice little bag clip. So anyway, kind of a nice little project for the younger guys, so younger kids. And that's it.